Alright guys, I'm going to show you guys how to figure out what the voltages are and the turn-ons are for a power supply that you don't know anything about. We're going to start with an obvious one. There's 100 videos on where people tell you what all the color codes are. We're going to pretend like we don't know what the color codes are, and we're going to figure out how to turn it on. Then I'll show you one that doesn't have any wires and show you how to figure out how to turn it on. Okay, got to start with a voltmeter. You don't need anything this fancy. Even the old needle sweep ones will work for this, but you need to have a voltmeter. First things we're going to do, we're going to pretend like we're completely colorblind. I haven't got a clue what these colors are. Okay? So, first you need to find a good ground. And the easiest way to tell is the metal case is ground, which means any of these wires that have almost no resistance, basically less than 2.5 ohms, should be connected to ground. And it has to be a stable. I mean, you may have some going through transformers or something, and it'll fluctuate around. But a stable resistance, less than 2.5 ohms, but in reality it's probably going to be something like 0.5 ohms or something like that. So, let's make sure we can see this meter. Okay. Start with simple harness. We have red, yellow, and black. Obviously the turn-ons aren't going to be in there. That's what connects to the I'm putting it up out of the camera. Okay. Obviously the turn-ons aren't going to connect to any of these. The turn-ons are going to be in this big one that connects to the computer. But just for ease of measuring, we're going to find a ground. Let's take our meter, set it to ohms of resistance. So make sure it works. We're going to take one and we're just going to jam it on the case somewhere. Make sure we got a good solid ground there. The other one we're just going to start going down the pins. Look at that. That's measuring 109, 205. Keeps going up. Obviously that's not it. Let's go to the next pin. Next pin we have 0.1 ohms. That looks like a ground and it's black. Just for the heck of it, let's go to the next one. Yep, 200, 300 ohms. Yeah, that's clearly not. So it's clear that the black is the ground. I know it sounds stupid, but when you get to one that you don't know, it helps. So, clear that the black is the ground. So here we go. We know our turn-on is not going to be anything that's in a large bundle of wires. So, obviously we have a whole bunch of this color. So that can't be it. How many yellows we got? We got a ton of yellows out here, so I doubt the yellow is it. How many reds we have? Well, we have a ton of reds, so those can't be it either. And we already know that black is ground. So that leaves us with 4 wires here, right? Now, one of these 4 wires is going to be a 5-volt signal that's going to be there all the time. That one is for the motherboard, just to keep the motherboard turned on so that when you push your power button, it can send the signal to what it needs to do. Okay? So your computer's always got that. As long as it's plugged in, even if it's turned off, you've got that 5-volt signal. We're not looking for that 5-volt signal. We're looking for a signal that's going to be a little less than 5 volts. Probably around 3.5 volts. Because it's just going to be a tiny little signal, just checking to see if you've got power. So let's start with, I don't know, let's start with the blue one. Let's see what we got on that blue one here. So you can see it better. Here's that blue one. Let's click on it. I guess we should go to power now. See, orange, nothing. Let's go to that blue one. What do we have? We have 0.03 volts. I guess that's nothing. Let's try the green one then. What do we have on the green one? We have 3 volts. Woo, that's cool. So it could be the green one. We have 2 others to check though too. We got a purple one here. What does it have? 5 volts. That's that 5 volts I was telling you about. I know it says negative, but I've got my wires backwards. You can use the ground that's actually on the wires, probably better, but if you can case ground it, it does the same thing. So I'm just doing that so that I have both my hands to be used. Okay, so we said that purple That's yellow, nothing there. That purple is clearly your 5 volts. And the gray one, nothing there. Okay? So we don't need to worry about that. So back to what we had. We have the green one. And there's your 3.5 volts I was talking about. And if you notice, that's this green one. What's right next to it? A ground. That's because the power turn on sense wire, which is that 3.5 volt one, to turn on your power supply, you have to ground that wire. You don't want to ground the 5 volt. That's the signal to the computer. And if you're worried about whether it is or not, you can use one of those tiny little light bulbs and check and ground it. That way you don't burn something up if you're not sure. But if you take this, I would use a paper clip, but my wife for some reason thinks plastic's better than metal, so I didn't have one. I just tinned a wire. So we shove this in here. In theory, the power supply should be on. Let's find out. What do we have? Here we go. There's our 3.5 volts on the orange wire. That red wire has our 5 volt signal. And I bet you that yellow wire is our 12. There it is, 12 volts. Now, if you look, it's only 11.76 volts. That's because you don't have any load on the system. If you loaded the system, that voltage would go up. So if you took, say, your 5 volt signal here, and you put it through a resistor, this is a 10 ohm resistor. If you put it through a resistor and ground that bad boy, that should give you, where is it at? There it is. Nothing. Well, something like that. It's not doing it on this one. Doesn't matter. The point is, it's your 12 volt reference. Usually when you ground them and you start putting loads on them, they come up to your 12 volts better. It stays at 9, or it fluctuates around. The 5 is much better. This is also really, really old. It may have a blown capacitor in it for all I know. It's just the one I grabbed off the pile. The point is, we found our signal by finding the wire that had 3.5 volts on it all the time and grounding it. And that gives you your signal. So, obviously, you check any of the other things and they're going to say, ground that green wire, you've got power. Once you found that, you can put that sucker on a switch to turn it on, whatever you want, and you can take and get your 12 volts out of your yellow, your 5 volts out of your red. If you want 3.5 volts, some digital circuits are good for 3.5 volts, you can get those out of your orange. And you can go in and cut them there, put switches, whatever you want to do. But that's the one that everybody has a video about. Let me show you when you don't have color codes. Bam! If you saw my last video, I'm dropping everything. Okay, if you saw my last video, you saw this thing. I was talking about where you can get power supplies. So you plugged it in. This one has a power light and it has a light if you have a problem. Okay, like it shorts or something, gives you a light. It of course is plugged in, so it should be powered, but it's not. So we follow the exact same thing we did before. What this has is a plate, because it was a blade, part of a server. You ground the case, put it on resistance, and start looking for that ground. It's probably going to be one of the larger plates, obviously. It's not that one. 100 and something ohms. Let's try this big old bad boy. 0.6 ohms, that might be our ground. Just for the heck of it, let's try a couple of others. Nothing there. Yeah, these are all pretty high ohms. That's 3 ohms, it might be, but now the lowest possible one is going to be your ground. You notice all these are pretty high, 20 ohms. So it's this big old ground plane here that's our ground. Okay? So now that we know that's our ground, that'll be the one you will ground to. Obviously, I'm still going to ground it to the case just for ease of use. But you'll need that ground for later. I'll show you why. So we put this on voltage now. Make sure you can see that. I'm not pulling the wool over your eyes. Alright. let's start looking for that same 3.5 volts we were looking for before. Now remember, there will be a 5 volt in here too. That 5 volt is, of course, just the keep alive memory for the board. No, it's not that one. See how it goes straight to 0? That's because that's ground. Keep on going. Keep on going. Where are you at? Oh, there's our 5 volt. There's our 3.5. Now, if it doesn't, there it is, 3.73 volts. I think that would be it right there. And then you have these other pins here and here. So, let's see if you can see that. I hope you can see that. My lighting is terrible. Let's try zooming in just a little bit. Okay. You see what I did here? Just checked each of these. When I got to this one here, I think that was it. Right there. Third one in, we have our 3.7 volts. Yeah, 3.5 volts. So that's our signal right there. 1, 2, 3 in, and then your ground is over here. So those are the ones that are going to have to turn it on, just like we did before. So, zoom it back out. All right. Let's take the same thing. 1, 2, 3, and watch what happens. Did you hear that? Probably not. Let me turn it up on its... You know what? How do I do this? Let me turn it around so you can see that light. Here's what happened. The fan kicked on for just a split second and turned back off, and the red light came on. So, uh-oh, we have a problem, right? There's nothing wrong with this power supply. Believe me, I've already had it turned on. See that? Fan came on for a second, shut off, and the red light's on. Now let me tell you why that is. The reason that is because this power supply has a self-test in it, and it's looking for a signal. It's looking for a load on that 5 volts. So, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to find that 5 volts real quick, which you can do with a light bulb. As I said before, you can take a little light bulb. Those little light testers are kind of nice to have. Because they give you a good signal load. But if I go to my 3 volts here, let's see if we can find that 5 volts here. I don't know if you saw that jump, but she jumped for a second. Well, you see that 5 volts there? It jumps a little when it does that, but you got 5 volts here and you got a ground here. If I were to connect these, then the thing would run. Now, I can be stupid and sit here and try to hold this, but I'm going to solder this on real quick so that you can see what I'm talking about. This is a 10 watt, 10 ohm resistor. I don't need 10 watts, I only need about 2.5 watts. And the way I know that is because that's a 5 volt signal to ground. So 5 volts at 10 ohms, if you know Watt's law, you take the power equals voltage squared divided by resistance. Well, we know our resistance is 10 watts, the voltage is 5 volts. So if you take 5 volts squared, that's 25, divided by 10, it's 2.5, that's 2.5 watts. Gives you what you got. So 10 watt resistor, it ain't even gonna feel 2.5 watts. So let's, ow, I'm not real smart, am I? Yeah, it's old. Radio Shack's not in business anymore. Now, I don't like soldering straight to gold because of something called gold embrittlement. It actually makes your solder kind of soft. But it's what we have to do. So we're gonna, this is not permanent. Eventually I'm gonna actually solder on the inside and put a switch on this bad boy. But that connects that thing. Always remember, when you're gonna put your iron away, put some solder on it. Don't put it away clean, because you're actually putting it away dirty. that heat will damage the tip. You just put a glob of solder on there, put your iron away. That way that tip stays fresh and clean. When you fire it back up and it melts it away, you just wipe it off and go. So now we've got our signal there, just like we were talking about before. This is still our ground plane. We're going to connect these, and notice the unit's on. I don't know if you can hear that fan running, but you know what? This is stupid. Let's just solder this on here. We'll do it this way. Let's unplug it. I didn't think this video through very well, so bear with me for a second. I'm just going to solder this on so when you plug it in, it comes on. I'll remove it later. So I want you guys to be able to see it. So we got third one in. Let me do that. Put a little bit of flux on here so it's not a cold joint. And there we go. Darn it. Maybe if I thought a little bit. Yeah, I am not doing this very well because my hand's all shaky. Alright, let's try this one more time here. There we go. That's a little prettier. Now, same thing here. I guess we're already there. I'll just connect it where that resistor is. Alright. And yeah, this is really rigged, but this is not permanent. Okay, this is just for you folks at home so you can see it. Alright. There. I strongly suggest you get some flux. That is no clean flux, so it's basically non-activated. It won't corrode your circuits. If I was building something new or making it permanent, I would probably use a regular MOA flux or something and clean it, because it gives you a better appearance and it's just a little better. But for something like this, the no clean flux works very well. Alright, let's get this up here so you guys can see it. You see that? I just connected the two. That center one's that ground plane there. That one right here's your ground plane. That's that 3-volt signal we had. And then your 5-volt signal was over there. So I put a resistor in there. Now let's see if it works. Remember we had a red light. Now, when we plug it in, the light's green. Fan's running. I doubt you can hear it, but it's running. And still on our ground, we have, there's a 3.3 volts, there's a 12 volts, and you have all these little ones. There's a 5 volts, one right next to it, 4.7 volts, I don't know why, probably another 5 volt, 3.2 volts, 0.3, I don't know what that one is, that's probably another ground. Anyhow, let's see, some of these we won't know. They may be back signals and things like that. So, there's that 5 volts we had before. And then there's another 5 volt signal, and I don't know. For some reason the two end ones don't have much of anything there. But you have a 5 volt, 3.5, 12 volt, just like we had with that other power supply. You had to do a little more work to get it, but it's a more stable power supply. If you notice, that 12 volts was dead on 12 volts. And that's because this is a better power supply. It's not for just home use. This is a one meant for a server. You can find these everywhere. The old servers are going away, I guess. Not really going away, but see that? 12.028. Dead on perfect. If you open this up, there's actually a little adjustment screw on these things. You can adjust and get that higher or lower just a little bit if you want the voltage a little bit different. But the idea is find that 3.5 volt signal, ground it, the power supply comes on. If all you get is a quick jerk and then it goes right back off, it's looking for a load. Find you a load. 10 watts pretty much takes care, or a 10 watt 10 ohm resistor pretty much takes care of most of them. You could go a little bigger if you wanted to, but one thing that I do is I will take these, put it on a switch inside. That way if you use that 5 volts, you can turn off the load on it. But that's pulling your, that's keeping that thing going. It gets a little warm, but nothing big, nothing you can't keep your hand on, because it is pulling 2.5 ohms or 2.5 watts. Hope that helps you guys. If it does, please like this video. Maybe even subscribe if you feel like it. I'll keep trying to show things like this. I don't like to just tell somebody how to do it. I like to show them how to figure out how to do it. With what I showed you here, you should be able to find a power supply on anything, even a TV. Find that little 3 volt signal, 3.5 volt signal, ground it, and that power supply will come on. You'll have your 24 volts, 12 volts, everything. So, hope that helped. Like and subscribe. All that good stuff that they tell us to do. And I'll keep trying to make some of these. Hopefully I'll get some better equipment, because I know this is terrible. I'm literally doing this in a barn. Alright, talk to y'all later.